Jamie looked on as John rode towards the target and smiled as he hit it firm and dead center. For the last Sennight, he'd been having John work on his lance work, and it was starting to show. His horsemanship was incredible, but his handling of the lance still needed some work. While it would be years before he rode in the lists, it was better to start as early as possible. And though some found using rings a good place to begin, Jamie preferred to use targets. Rings allowed for precision, but there was no feel for how much force hitting something required. Far better to get used to the fact that when your lance hit something solid, your arm was going to feel it. He watched as John began to make the run again, once again hitting the target dead center, and this time even firmer. He made his way over to the targets themselves to judge just how firm John had been hitting them. He was happy to see that they were marked, meaning John had been giving his all. He nodded to him and signaled for him to dismount, watching as John patted and whispered to Winter, the horse's name itself, almost causing him to laugh. John led Winter to the water trot and made his way over towards him, Ghost, his ever-faithful shadow, catching Jamie by surprise, as he usually did. To say Ghost had a habit of sneaking up on people would be an understatement. Not only was the wolf silent, but he moved more quickly and stealthily than any animal had a right to. The only constant was that wherever John was, the wolf was sure to be close by. It reassured Jamie to see it to be truthful. Not only was John completely taken with the wolf, but the wolf, it seemed, reciprocated. The two were so close that to Jamie it felt like they had been together forever. "How did I do?" John asked as he reached him. "Good, very good, you're getting better. How's the arm?" "It's fine," John said as he stretched it. "John?" "All right, it hurts like hell. I didn't realize how hard I was hitting the targets," John replied sheepishly. "We'll take a rest for a few days. No sparring or lancing," Jamie said as John nodded. "Go get something to eat. We'll speak later." "And John, no sparring, is that understood?" he added before smiling and walking away. Earlier that day, he received an invitation to Lord Hightower's daughter's wedding in Old Town. He originally was going to ignore it, but the more he'd thought about it, the more it seemed like a good idea. He'd been going a little crazy spending all his time in the Rock, and while he had found he actually enjoyed his duties now, it was time Tyrion ran the place for a while. Besides, it would keep his aunt off his back. Ever since the ball, she'd been pressuring him to invite Lady Alizane for dinner or a ride or anything at all, really, and Jamie had no wish to lead the lady on. By going to this wedding, he could at least pretend to his aunt he was going to see which eligible lady took his fancy. But mainly he was doing it because it would be good for more of the realm to get to know John. Jamie casually walked back to the lift. He had no pressing business today and was actually at a loss for what to do. Normally he'd have spent the time sparring or perhaps going for a ride, but he found he didn't like to do so alone as much as he had once used to. With John practicing his lance and Jerrine and Tyrion at Lannisport, he really didn't know what to do with himself. When the lift reached the family floor, he headed to the small dining area, figuring he'd grab something to eat and head back to his room, perhaps do some reading, or catch up with some of the less important correspondence he'd put off. As he walked into the dining area, however, he knew he was done for. There was no escape, no chance to duck back out. He'd been seen. "Poor Jamie, come join us," Emmon Frey said loudly. "Ah, Sir Emmon, I was just going to grab something and go," Jamie said, trying to retrieve the situation. No, stay, talk for a while, Lord Jamie. I haven't had the chance to speak to you for an age." Jamie reluctantly went and sat beside him, and dwarfing the smaller man by more than a head and a half. It wasn't that he hated the man. More, the man was a complete and utter idiot, and like most Freys that Jamie had been unfortunate to meet, Emmon thought way too highly of himself. Although given the match his father had made for him, perhaps in his case there was more merit in it than in those of his kin. "Or Jamie, I was wondering if you'd given any thought to who may take over Castamere if your plans work out." Emmon said, surprising him. "I haven't." Sir, none at all. To be frank, I think it's better to see if the plans actually work first, don't you? I do, my lord. But if they do, then perhaps you'll need a strong man to keep those workers in line, Emmon said, puffing out his chest. Jamie had to resist the urge to laugh. While putting Jenna in charge would accomplish a lot. Emmon as a strong man was just too funny an image. The fool had been laid up in bed for nigh on a week because of a rotten piece of fruit he'd stupidly consumed. Not to mention he cowered when Jamie's aunt came into the room. A strong man and the name Frey did not belong in the same sentence. I shall consider it, sir, Jamie said and smiled as he saw John come into the room with Ghost following behind him. If you'll forgive me, Emmon, I see my squire requires my attention, Jamie said, and quickly made his way to John. Say nothing and just look worried and nod, he said as he reached him. He noticed Emmon watching from over his shoulder, and John played his part well, the two of them turning and leaving the dining hall, the snack he'd come in to partake in, quickly forgotten. They made their way down to Jamie's solar, John smirking all the way. It's not that funny, Jamie said exasperatedly. I think you'll find it is my lord, John said before they both laughed. As they arrived at his solar, he called one of the servants over and sent her to get 2 small meals for him and John. They went inside, and he took his seat while John did likewise. After a few moments, the servant returned, and she laid the plates out on the table. Thank you, Sarah, that will be all. Of course, my lord, the girl said with a bow before leaving. Jamie found that once away from Sir Emmon, he was suddenly more hungry than he thought he'd been. He noticed John seemed even hungrier, although he stuck to the fruit and cheese while feeding the meat to Ghost, who eagerly ate it up. When the meal was finished, Jamie decided he'd bring up the trip with John. We'll be heading on a trip soon. John, Sir Jorah, and Lady Liness are to be married in Old Town, and I've been invited, Jamie said. You want me to come with you, my lord? Aye, John. You're my squire. And besides, you should visit the realm when the opportunity arrives. Have you not wanted to visit the Citadel or see the High Tower? I never gave it much thought, my lord. Just assumed I'd stay in the north. But I'd like to see more places. Storm's End, King's Landing, Highgarden. But if I had a choice, I guess I'd really love to visit Dragonstone, John said, and Jamie felt a shudder down his spine. One day, my king, one day, Jamie thought. Cat was furious. Breaking her fast had been bad enough, but listening to Sir Wylis sing the praises of the bastard had almost forced her to scream and shout. Only the fact they were in public had stopped her. When he had said that the boy had been given a direwolf, she'd almost lost it, though. Bad enough, he looked more like Ned than Robb did. But to have a living symbol of the house also was just too much. But what had actually tipped her over the edge was what Wylis said about the king. When she heard that he had offered the bastard a prize for winning a tourney in which he had obviously cheated or used some trickery to do so, she had been beside herself. How dare he? How dare the bastard take what should be her son's by right? Robb was trueborn. He was Ned's heir. It should be him receiving gifts from the king. After all, the king was Ned's best friend. Surely he should favor his true-born son. But hearing that he offered to legitimize the boy was just too much. No, she would not have it. She wouldn't stand for it. Neither her nor her family would allow a bastard usurp her true-born children. Winning favors from a king. Getting legitimized. She had never thought there could be anything worse than having the boy here in her home. But him out there using his bastard nature to ingratiate himself to his betters was much worse. She needed to speak to Ned. They had to put a stop to this now, before it was too late. She stormed through the castle servants, giving her a wide berth. After obviously seeing her expression, she finally made it to Ned's solar and walked in without knocking. Ned, we need to discuss the bastard, she practically shouted. Can, what are you talking about? Ned replied, his voice strained. He's doing it. He's doing exactly what I told you he would. He's trying to steal Winterfell from Robb. Maybe I should leave, my lord? Kat shuddered and turned her head. Wyman Manderley sat at her husband's desk, and the look he was giving her was anything but friendly. He looked disgusted, and for a brief moment Kat felt shame. But it quickly passed, and the Lady of Winterfell shrugged it off. Why should she feel shame? It was the bastard who was trying to steal her son's birthright. She was only doing what a good mother would do, protecting her son. "Thank you, Wyman. I'll speak to you later," Ned said as Wyman nodded to him. "My lady," the lack of respect clear in Wyman's voice as he left. She waited until the door was closed before she got ready to speak again, but she never got the chance to. "What are you thinking, Kat? What's wrong with you?" Ned said angrily. "Your bastard is trying to steal Winterfell," she shouted at him. "Jon would never do such a thing, and my bannermen would never stand for it. You have to stop this foolishness." "It's not me being foolish, it's you. Your bastard is out there ingratiating himself with Jaime Lannister and now with the king. Did you know your friend offered to legitimize him? That he now has a direwolf? Your bastard has a direwolf, Ned, while your trueborn son does not? What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that your bastard was given a direwolf. Ned, it's bad enough I'm reminded he looks more like a Stark than Robb. Now he has a direwolf too. You need to take it off him. It should belong to Robb. He's your heir." "I have no idea what you're talking about, Kat. When did Jon get a direwolf?" Ned asked. "Sir Wylis was talking while we broke our fast. He said they delivered a direwolf to Jon. You need to have it returned." "Ned, a bastard shouldn't have it. It should be Robb's." "Kat, enough. If Jon has a direwolf, then so be it. I didn't give it to him, and I will not be taking it off him. How could I, even if I wanted to? What am I to do? Send someone to Casterly Rock and demand they hand over a Jon's direwolf? Are you even listening to yourself?" "So you'll just allow your bastard to keep it? Are you going to allow Robert to legitimize him as well?" "Robert would never legitimize Jon without speaking to me first. You're being irrational, Kat." "Am I?" He offered it to him. "Ned offered to legitimize your bastard. What's next? Will he give him Winterfell too? When will you realize bastards are covetous by nature? They want what trueborns have. He'll usurp Robb, and I'll not have it, Ned. If you won't do something about the bastard, I will." "Eno. No. Shh," Ned shouted. "I've tried to be reasonable, Kat, but you're speaking like a crazy woman. I don't even recognize you right now. I understand you have no love for Jon. But this stops. I'll have no threats made against him. Am I understood?" "He's trying to steal from our children, Ned," Kat exclaimed loudly. "No, Kat, he's not. It's all in your mind. Now let me be clear. It stops now. You've gone too far. Listen to what you're saying. Even if Robert offered to legitimize him, which I doubt he did, then by all accounts Jon refused and accepted the gift of a horse instead." "What do you mean?" Kat asked confusedly. "Wyman was just speaking to me about Jon. The king gifted him whatever he wanted, a blade, coin, or a horse, and Jon accepted a horse and even did that reluctantly. So you see, you're worrying yourself over nothing." Kat said nothing more. It was clear to her that she wouldn't get through to Ned. His love for the bastard and his mother was still too strong. She'd send a letter to her uncle and to her brother. They'd see what she did, that the bastard was not to be trusted, that he needed to be dealt with before he usurped her son, Jon. They were leaving today, and he felt a little torn about it. On one hand, he was excited for the trip, though not the ship journey to get there. On the other, he would not see Joy for a moon at least, and he felt sad about that. With her lessons, and now that Martin and Willem were back living at Casterly Rock, Joy had more people around her, and Jon's absence wouldn't be felt as much as it would have been just a few moons earlier. But they had a routine, and no matter what, Jon spent time with her almost every day. He read her bedtime story, and the little girl found difficulty sleeping without it. He knew, of course, that as she grew older, the time they'd spend together would change. The nature of what they did would evolve, but still, he wasn't ready for it to change just yet. He had thought about leaving Ghost with her, but the looks the wolf had given him when he suggested it had changed his mind. The wolf would be coming to Old Town with him after all. Joy had loved Ghost from the moment she met him. The little wolf was patient and gentle when around her, The first day he'd introduced them, he'd thought that he'd lost the wolf. Such was Joy's connection to him. "Joy, this is Ghost. Say hello to Joy, Ghost," he said as the wolf strolled towards her. "Lolo, host." "Joy," said, bending down and grabbing the little fur ball. "Look yon P-Wetty," she said as she held the wolf tightly. "Yes, he is pretty, isn't he?" John said while the wolf looked back at him indignantly. They spent the next few days getting used to one another, and Joy loved throwing things for Ghost to chase after. He never brought them back to her, though he was a wolf, not a dog, John thought as he smiled at the memory. He and Geryon had agreed that he wouldn't say goodbye to Joy before he left. Instead, he'd spent as much time with her as possible until then. He headed towards the lift, getting ready to join Jamie and the others who were waiting on him. He'd been a little late joining them as he'd grabbed the last look at Joy before leaving, finding the girl sound asleep. As he was about to enter the lift, a servant arrived and handed him a note from the maester. "John, your package will be ready when you arrive in Old Town. Just seek out the Mermaid's Tail and speak to Captain Flint. All the best, Sir Wylis." He smiled as he entered the lift. Ghost already there waiting for him when Jamie had told him they were going to a wedding. He decided he'd need a gift. He thought about it long and hard before finally deciding what to bring. But there was no way he'd get what he wished for anywhere in the West, and certainly not in Old Town. He realized quickly that the only hope he'd have of getting it would be using the Manderley's sew at Center Raven with a drawing, and a request more in hope than expectation. It seemed that he had been luckier than he thought, and as the lift made its way to Courtyard, he resolved to pay the Manderleys back in more than gold. His father's bannermen had come through for him quite a lot since he had arrived in the Rock. They passed letters to his siblings and father when he asked them. They'd delivered one of the presents he'd found for Sansa, just in time for her name day. And they had brought him Ghost, he thought as he looked at the white wolf beside him. He owed them a lot, and would pay them back as well as he could. As he left the lift, he found that Jamie and their accompaniment were already ready to go. He saw Alirs and Jors mounted already, and Jamie was saying goodbye to Geryon and Tyrion. He made his way over to them, smiling when Ghost raced ahead to annoy Tyrion as was his wont. While not mean or malicious, Ghost really enjoyed making Tyrion uncomfortable for some reason. "Ah, here he is now," Geryon said as he walked towards him. "All set, John?" Tyrion asked as he tried to shrug off Ghost, who was attempting to bite his breeches. "Oh, aye, my lord," John said, grabbing the wolf much to Tyrion's relief. "Shall we then, John?" Jamie said, nodding to the two men. John said his goodbyes and made his way to the cart carrying their things. The journey to Lannisport wasn't long, but it was still too far for Ghost to make on foot, and carrying him on winter wasn't really possible. The wolf had grown incredibly in the 2 moons. Since he'd arrived, he was now the size of a small dog, and given that he was less than 5 moons old, by John's estimate, he wondered just how big he'd grow to. The journey to Lannisport was dull and boring, John thought. Ghost. It seemed agreed as he'd fallen asleep on John's lap. When they arrived, they wasted no time boarding the ship. They'd be at sea. At least a Senite. And John was hoping the weather would stay fine. It would be bad enough if he got the sickness of the sea. He shuddered to think what it would be like if Ghost did also. Tyrion was relishing being Lord of Casterly Rock and acting as Warden of the West. When Jamie had told him he was going to the Hightower wedding, he'd been surprised. His brother was not one for social occasions. But when he told him that as Lord he needed to care about such things more, Tyrion had agreed. It was one thing to dislike such events. It was another to ignore them. And Tyrion was glad his brother was starting to realize that. He had spent most of the morning working in Jamie's solar and had missed both breaking his fast and a midday meal, yet he wouldn't change what he was doing for anything in the world. Tyrion enjoyed the daily grind of being a lord more than he'd ever thought he would. perhaps because he in some ways never thought he'd be given the chance. His father would have never given him the rock. He knew that now, and while Jaime could marry and have heirs, Tyrion knew even without the rock Jaime had plans for him. That was all he had ever wanted, really, to be important, to serve his family to the best of his abilities and be appreciated for it. Jaime certainly did that, always quick to give him credit whether Tyrion felt it was due or not, placing him in charge of things that needed to be done, things that actually mattered. Which is why, as he looked over the reports of their trading deals, he was glad to see they were making a tidy sum. Most of their coins still came in from their gold and silver mines, but with the changes Jaime, he, and Jon had made, they were starting to see a larger return from trade also. They'd increased it by more than treble, since Jaime had taken over, and Tyrion was a large part of the reason why. With that, and the possibilities from the wind wheels, they would soon be earning more coin than they had in their father's best year. "My lord, Lord Geryon and Lady Jenna have come to see you. Alec," his guard said as he entered the room. "Send them in, Alec," Tyrion said as he moved to place out 3 glasses. His aunt and uncle entered and sat down. Tyrion pointed to the glasses and they nodded, so he filled them, the Arbor Gold. A nice vintage, but nothing special, he thought as he sipped his own. "We wish to discuss something with you, Tyrion," Jenna said as Geryon smirked beside her. "Of course, dear aunt. I'm yours to command," Tyrion replied as his uncle tried not to laugh. "We think it's about time you considered your future commitments." "Wow," Jenna said. "I'm sorry, aunt. I'm not following. She's talking about marriage," Geryon said as Tyrion almost spat his wine out. "Surely you jest, aunt. I'm a dwarf, in case you didn't notice, not exactly marriage material." "You're the heir to Casterly Rock and a Lannister. Any lady would be damn lucky to have you for a husband," his aunt said, leaving no room for argument. But Tyrion felt a sense of pride well up in his chest. His aunt and he had always got along. She had never agreed with his father's treatment of him, and had stuck up for him and called his father out many times. To hear her say he was marriage material was something he loved her for, but she was wrong, despite the points she raised. He may even one day be Lord of Casterly Rock, but that would never wipe the shame of being a dwarf from the eyes of any worthy lady. "Very well, aunt. I shall leave it in your capable hands," Tyrion said, knowing it was a fruitless task. "Good. I shall endeavor to find a suitable lady." Old Town Jon. Arriving at Old Town, Jon was amazed to see the high tower itself. The structure was majestic, and he almost got a creak in his neck from trying to look up to the top of it. They said it stood even higher than the wall, and Jon would agree with them had he ever actually seen the wall. They departed their ship and quickly found their accommodations, Jaime having purchased all the rooms in an inn, despite the innkeeper's protests, which had unsurprisingly disappeared once he was presented with Lannister gold. After a warm bath and a change into his second best set of clothes, a black tunic, black breeches, black leather boots with a white shirt being his only concession to color, his best set kept aside for the wedding itself, he made his way to Jaime's room, as they would soon be heading to present themselves to the High Towers and thank them for the invite. When he arrived at Jaime's room, he found he was already leaving, and they made their way from the inn. Walking through the streets of Old Town, Jon paid attention to as much of it as he could. The Thieves' Market and Ragpicker's Wynd, the various little islands that made up the city. He looked down to Ghost, who looked uncomfortable beside him, the flowery smell of the city obviously not to his taste. When they reached the High Tower, Jon almost gasped at the beauty of it, the black stone at the bottom only enhancing it in his opinion. The guards bid them enter, and they made their way through labyrinthine halls, and as they walked, Jon thought that only a fool or a madman would ever dare try to take the tower. "This way, my lord," a guard said as the first set of guards turned back to the main doors. They followed the man upstairs and across corridors before finally arriving at 2 large doors. The guards in front asked who they were, and one of them quickly made his way inside before coming back a few moments later and allowing them to go in. The great hall was large and imposing. Though John found it a little too dark, they made their way to the large table at the top of the hall. Seated there were, who John assumed to be the Hightowers themselves. The older man must be Lord Leighton, while to his right sat a younger, almost identical-looking man who frowned as they stood in front of the table. John was pleased to see Sir Jorah sitting with a very beautiful lady, and when the knight noticed him, he gave him a nod and a smile which John was grateful for. As he looked down the table, he saw Lady Olenna and Lord Mace, and who he assumed was his wife, and he felt his heart race just a little. If they were here, did it mean Marjorie and her brothers were too? He longed to check the rest of the room, but before he could, the steward began to speak. Lord Jaime Lannister, Lord of Casterly Rock and Warden of the West. My lord, I bid you welcome to my home, Lord Leighton said once the steward had finished. Thank you, Lord Hightower. I am grateful for the invite, Jaime said with a bow. John stood behind him just at his right shoulder as always, and he bowed when Jaime did. We did not expect you would attend, Lord Jaime, the younger man next to Lord Leighton said with a smile. I would not miss it for anything, Sir Baelor. For was it not at the tourney I hosted that Sir Jorah and Lady Lanesi first met? Jaime said, smiling back at the man. Indeed, it was my lord, and my betrothed and I are thankful to you for it, Lady Lanesi said with her smile beaming as she looked at Sir Jorah. I am glad to see you both so happy, my lady. I wish you naught but good fortune, Jaime said. And Sir Jorah nodded at him. Invitations done, they turned to leave, and John was rewarded with seeing Marjorie sitting at a table to his right. Loras was sitting beside her, as was an older man who must be their brother. When Loras saw him, he gave him a wave and turned to Marjorie and whispered into her ear. John was pleased to see a smile appear on her face when she turned to him, and he couldn't help but smile back at her. The next morning, John got up early. The next morning, they had spent the night enjoying the sights of Old Town, and the city was completely different at night. It seemed to come more alive to John, and the people seemed to enjoy themselves more. He, Jaime, and the rest of their company had done so too. Even Illyrs and Jors had been given the night off, and after exploring the city itself, most of them had spent the evening singing and drinking in the tavern. John had even been convinced to play some tunes on a harp after Jaime had criticized the minstrel as not being that good. He had refused first, but after Jaime had cajoled him, he had finally given in, playing the Dornishwind's wife and Jenny of Oldstones, though he had refused to sing either himself, much to Jaime's annoyance. While he had not given himself much credit for his harp playing, his tutor had said he was a natural, and after hearing some of the patrons of the inn ask him to play more, he had felt that perhaps he was better than he thought. He had declined, though, as something about Jaime's expression had made him feel like he wasn't enjoying the music as much as others. After he broke his fast, Illyrs and Jors headed to the docks to see if the mermaid's tail had arrived. When they got there, they found to his delight it had. He asked for Captain Flint and told the first mate who he was. After a few moments, the captain arrived, carrying a package which he handed to John. Here you are, young lad, with Lord Wyman and Sir Wylas's compliments. Sure you are, you. Thank you, Captain. Please give this to Lord Wyman for his troubles, and take this for your own, John said, holding out a large pouch of coin to pay for the package, and a smaller one to pay the captain. It's fine, lad. Lord Wyman paid us well to deliver it, and he requires no payment. Consider it a gift. At least take the coin for drinks for the men, Captain, John said, trying to hand the man the small pouch. But the man refused, and John was at a loss what to do, so he took the package and walked towards the closest inn, entering it with Illyrs, while Jorah stood outside watching on as Ghost pissed against a wall. I'd like to order a cask of your best ale and have it delivered to a ship, he said to the innkeeper. Very well. But it'll cost you, lad, the small man said before John handed him the pouch. Deliver it to the Mermaid's Tail, to Captain Flint, John said as the man counted the coin and nodded enthusiastically. Illyrs smiled at him as they left, finding Ghost thankfully finished. They decided to make their way back to their lodgings. Although, as they walked, the wolf seemed to get a second wind and rushed off to mark somewhere else. Before he could follow, John was startled as he heard his name being called. He turned and was happy to see Marjorie and her older brother walking towards them, the older brother using a cane. "Lady Marjorie, my lord, a pleasure." John said before. Marjorie raised her eyebrow at him in that way of hers. "Sorry, just Marjorie," he said quickly, earning a smile. "Much better. Just John," she replied. "Allow me to introduce my brother Willis. Willis, this is John Snow, Lord Jamie's squire." "My lord, a pleasure," John said with a bow. "I've heard a lot about you, John." Loris and Darlin both can't stop talking about the tourney and the squire's duel, and Marjorie said you were most kind to them during their visit. Willis said, and John smiled sheepishly. "I was lucky in both cases. My lord, the tourney, and in meeting Marjorie and your brothers, they made it more bearable." "Nonsense, John. You give yourself too little credit. You won the tourney due to your skill, and you were very gracious to my brothers and I," Marjorie said, and John smiled at her. "What kind of dog is that?" Willis said loudly as Ghost strolled towards them. "No, a dog, my lord, a direwolf," John said as Marjorie looked on in wonder. "Ghost, say hello to Marjorie," he added as the wolf made his way towards her and licked her hand much to her delight. John watched as she began to pet the wolf and could see her growing more and more comfortable with him. "Oh my, his fur is so soft," Marjorie said, her smile beaming as the wolf lapped up the attention. "Is it truly a direwolf?" Willis asked. "Aye, my lord, it is. From north of the wall, my uncle Benjamin sent it to me." "I never thought I'd see one," Willis said as he leaned down to pet the wolf. Ghost looked to John and then to Marjorie. Seeing them both smile, he allowed the man pet him. The three of them played with Ghost for a little while, Marjorie giggling adorably as Ghost repeatedly grabbed John by the hand. After a while, though they had no choice but to take their leave. "I shall see you at the wedding then, John?" Marjorie asked. "You will. I'll look forward to it," John said. "It was a pleasure meeting you, John, and you too, Ghost," Willis said while looking at the wolf in awe. "You too, Lord Willis and I. Thank you for sending me Winter." "Winter?" Marjorie asked confusedly. "Aye, Lord Willis sent me a fine courser. I've named her Winter," John said, smirking. "Winter, of course you did," Marjorie laughed. "You're more than welcome, John. I hope she serves you well," Willis said, before they said their goodbyes. Jamie. The morning of the wedding was upon him. Jamie checked to make sure his gift was ready. He'd spent a lot of time and effort trying to find what could be considered a suitable gift for the bride and groom. John had told him that Sir Jorah would approve of anything he gave them, but Jamie wasn't sure he would. The necklace, though, was exquisite and was worth a small fortune, so at least they'd know he had made an effort. When he was ready, he headed for John's room. He'd been surprised John had bought a present for the wedding, but then again, he really shouldn't be. Not only was the groom one of his father's bannermen, but John was the kind of person who preferred to give presents rather than receive them, as the number of stuffed animals his cousin had would certainly attest to. Finding the room empty, he walked downstairs to see John talking with their guards, dressed and ready to go. "Morning, John. Lads, you ready?" "Aye, my lord. Shall we?" John said as they left the inn. They arrived at the reception hall with moments to spare. The gift-giving just about to take place. It would no doubt be done in both closeness to the family and then order of importance, so they had some time to go. Sitting down, he called a serving girl over and got her to bring him wine and some juice for John, smiling as he saw John ask for some meat for Ghost. Much to the wolf's pleasure, judging by its expression. Sometimes, looking at the wolf, Jamie felt as if it was far more intelligent than any animal had the right to be. He had noticed already that when meeting with people that may prove untrustworthy, The wolf immediately raised its hackles, and though it did not bark or make a sound, its teeth would show, and it would seem to be growling. After what to Jamie seemed like an age, he was called, and he and John made their way to the high table to present their gifts. He wondered what was in the package John carried, as it seemed rather large and quite soft, some clothing of some sort, perhaps. He walked to the table and handed his own gift to Lady Linesi, who opened it and thanked him before John moved to do the same. Jamie stepped back to watch. "My lady, our homeland is beautiful and wild and will be enhanced no doubt by your presence. However, if there's one thing that can't be changed about it, then it is that the weather takes a lot of getting used to. Speaking as someone who found when moving to the west that he was unprepared for the change, I offer you this, so you'll be more prepared than I," John said as he handed her the package. Jamie watched as both the lady, her betrothed, and the room itself seemed eager to see just what it was that this young man had gifted her. As she opened the package, he, along with the lady herself, gasped. The coat was beautiful. White fur lined its collar, hood, and cuffs, and the fabric itself, though obviously warm to wear, seemed light and airy. "I thank you, young man. It's a wonderful and very thoughtful gift." Linesi said, her smile beaming as she turned the coat over in her hands. "I thank you as well, John, for making my bride smile this day." Sir Jorah said, his smile as large as Linesi's. "You're more than welcome, Sir Jorah. My lady, I wish you both the best of fortune and many happy years to come." Jamie smiled as he looked around the room. The lady and her betrothed were more than happy, but it was the expressions on other faces which interested him. Lord Layton was looking on with approval, while Lady Olenna's expression seemed more intrigued. He looked to see most of the room whispering to each other and knew they'd be speaking of this for the rest of the day. Whatever other gifts the lady received today, none would match the thoughtfulness or simplicity of the gift John had given her. And Jamie felt the pride well up in his chest at what his king had done. Marjorie, the wedding was beautiful, the starry set magnificent. Her aunt had looked absolutely radiant, and yet, as the feast began, Marjorie couldn't help but think of Jon Snow. The gift he'd given her aunt was like nothing she'd seen before. When she finally got the chance to see it up close, she'd been amazed at how beautiful it was. It was as soft as ghost fur, and just as warm, she'd wager. But it was the little details which stunned her. Little beads that sparkled had been built into the coat to make it shine. John had somehow understood that practical didn't have to mean ugly, and her aunt adored it. She looked around trying to find where he was but couldn't see him anywhere. Loras had been sitting beside her but had disappeared somewhere a while ago, and Willis was speaking to their father, trying no doubt to get permission to leave before the dancing began, which made her feel so sad for her brother. He deserved so much. Yet he'd feel terrible sitting there while around him people danced and made merry. Her father, though, was not in the mood to agree by the looks of things, and Willis reluctantly took his seat back at their table. She had hoped John would be placed with them as he had in Casterly Rock, but apparently her grandfather felt a bastard shouldn't sit with trueborns. So instead she was sat at a table full of idiots like her cousins and Dick and Tarley. At least if his brother Sam was here, she'd have someone to converse with. When the dancing began, she saw Lord Jamie take to the floor with one of her older cousins, the look on his face priceless. He clearly seemed to want to be anywhere but here. She nodded to him as she reluctantly accepted Dickon's offer and made her way onto the dance floor. He must have stepped on her toes 5 times during the dance, and his conversation was dull, but she smiled and bore it well, just like the lady she was. When the dance was over, she made her way over to Lord Jamie's table. Perhaps John would be over there. But when she got there, she saw he wasn't and moved to go back to her own. As she did so, though, Lord Jamie smiled at her and nodded with his head to the door on the left. She looked to him again to be certain she had understood him, and he nodded again. "My lord," she said with a smile. Lady Marjorie, I hope you have a pleasant night." She hurriedly made her way to the door, and as she walked through it, she heard laughing from the large doors that opened into the gardens. Whatever was happening out there was apparently much more fun than the wedding inside, so she walked out to investigate. When she got out, she found John, Samuel Tarley, Loris, and a couple of other boys she didn't recognize along with John's guards. All of them were watching as ghosts chased after what appeared to be moths. "He'll never catch them," she said, causing them all to turn her way. "I wouldn't bet on it, Marge. He's very quick," Loris said, smiling as the little wolf jumped up, barely missing grabbing one of them. "Lady Marjorie, I didn't expect to see you here." Samuel stuttered adorably. "Oh, and why is that, Sam? Is this no place for a lady?" She teased. "No. It's I, no, my lady." "Careful, Sam. I found out quite quickly that Marjorie won't accept people telling her what she can't do." John smirked at her. "Oh, did you now, just John?" Marjorie said as she looked him right in the eye while trying her best to keep her face straight and unamused. I did, just Marjorie," he said, making her laugh. She moved closer to them, and John took off his coat and put it on the small wall so she could sit on it without dirtying her dress. She smiled at him and sat down. After a few moments, Ghost finally caught a moth and within seconds spat it back out. They all laughed, both at the moth flying off to safety and the look on the wolf's face as he realized that moths were not the tasty snacks he had thought they were. They spent the next hour or so out there laughing and joking with each other before finally they had to make their way inside. Samuel said his goodbyes to John and the other two lads, who turned out to be Blackwoods from the Riverlands, who had only gone to the wedding as their ship had been delayed, turned and bid them farewell. Loris and John entered the hall and walked to where Willis was sitting looking bored. The dancing was still going on, and she hoped John would ask her to dance again, but she was disappointed when he did not, though he explained his reasoning as he bid them good night. "I'd like to dance with you, Marjorie. Truly I would. But here in this hall, I doubt it would be allowed." "I understand, John. But you would dance with me if you could, wouldn't you?" she asked hopefully. "If I could, then there's nothing that would stop me. Good night, just Marjorie. Good night, just John," she said sadly as she watched him leave the hall.